Finn McCool, the giant of Knockmany Hill. In, in olden times, when Ireland's glens and woods were still filled with fairies and leprechauns, giants too lived on that fair Emerald Isle. One of these finest of those big folk was Finn McCool, who was wed to his lovely great lass Una. They made their home up on top of Knockmany Hill. Now, as any good giant, Finn McCool had his work to do, so he was often away from home. Lovely Una didn't seem to mind, though, for there was plenty to keep her own hands busy, spinning and knitting and even giving a pretty touch to their great house. Life was very pleasant indeed. One morning when Finn McCool was busy, working with his kin, building a causeway to Scotland, the word came that Cuchulainn was coming. Cuchulainn was a giant too, and without a doubt the strongest in that part of the world. When he walked, the very earth trembled, and with one blow of his fist, he had flattened a thunderbolt. It looked like a pancake, and he was so proud of that feat that he kept the thunderbolt in his pocket, to show how strong he really was. Every giant in Ireland had been given a good beating by Cuchulainn. Every giant, that is, except Finn McCool. And Cuchulainn swore by the green that he would never rest day or night, winter or summer, until Finn McCool was added to that list. So far, Finn had been smart enough. He kept moving about whenever he heard that Cuchulainn was in the neighborhood, but this time Cuchulainn was sure to get him. So Finn left the causeway and sped off for Knockmany Hill, his house, and his darling Una. "Finn, me love," said Una, greeting him at the door, "what brings you home so early from your work?" "The chance to get a sight of you, my sweet thing," said Finn. Since he was as honest as the summer day is long, he added, "and to keep out of the way of Cuchulainn. He's after me." Una soothed her husband. She brought him his slippers and lit a pipe for him. She stirred up the peat fire so it would be cozy. Then she set down a huge mug of stout and cut a gigantic slab of soda bread for her dearie. "Finn, husband of mine, enough is enough," said Una as gently as she could. "For years you have been hiking around from one place to another to avoid this giant man, Cuchulainn. Why, you even built our house high on this windiest of hills so you'd be able to spy him coming. You'll not get a moment's rest until you stand fast and face him." "Aye, I'll be getting plenty of rest if I stand fast and he knocks me down. I don't have the heart to face a man who can make a young earthquake just with his walk and who carries around a flattened thunderbolt just to prove how strong he is." And at that moment, a knock. At that, Knockmany Hill gave a little dance. "He's coming," said Finn. His face turned a fine shade of pale green. "Now hush," said Una, "and give me time to think. Do you worry that I won't do all I can to help you settle this matter once and for all?" Una then worked a charm the fairies had taught her. She took 9 woolen threads, each of a different color, and braided them into 3 braids. She put one around her arm, one circling her heart, and the third around her right ankle. Now nothing she did could fail. Next, she went around to all the neighbors to borrow 1 and 20 frying pans. She hid them in 1 and 20 loaves of bread, and she baked them on a fire the usual way. She set them in the cupboard with some bread she had baked the day before, and she took a pot of milk and made into fresh wet cheese, and put it along with some white stones at the foot of the cradle she had made up. "Now, my darling," she said, handing Finn some baby clothes, "put these on and do everything just as I am about to tell you. And remember," she said at the last, "Cuchulainn's strength lies in his brass finger. He has it on his right hand. Now quick, into the cradle, because I can hear that giant of a man at the door." "All right, woman," bellowed the giant at the door. "Where's that coward Finn McCool that I've been chasing after all this time?" Well, well, said Una, with her sweetest smile. Now isn't that a shame? Finn was off working on the causeway, when some important family affair called him away. But he'll be home by tea time, so why don't you just come right in and sit down? Poor Finn trembled in the cradle. See this, Cuchulainn said, pulling what looked like a pancake out of his pocket. This was a thunderbolt, until I caught it and flattened it. And that's what I'm going to do to Finn McCool, too. Tisk, tisk, said Una. That may not be as easy as you think. Finn McCool's a big broth of a man. Why, just take a look at our little baby, and he might be getting an idea of the strength and breadth of Finn himself. Cuchulainn peeked in at the cradle. Turtup, said the huge baby, looking back at him. Why? My, this is... What a big boy, Cuchulainn said. While you're waiting, why not have a bite to eat, said Una. She put some loaves of bread on the table, along with a can or two of butter, and a pile of cabbages. Cuchulainn, who was much as a glutton as he was a bully, popped a loaf of bread into his mouth and took a huge bite, right down on one of the frying pans. Clang! Yow! Shouted Cuchulainn. What kind of devil's bread is this? Here are two of my teeth falling out. That's Finn's bread, the only kind he eats, said Una. It is a bit too tough for you, huh? Too tough for me, shouted Cuchulainn. I should say not. Give me another. And he chomped down on another loaf and into another frying pan. I'll not have another tooth left in my head, woman. There's two more out. Cuchulainn hollered even louder. The baby began to holler too. Hungry, hungry. Ah, sweet dumpling, said Una, and she handed baby Finn a loaf, and because there was no frying pan in it, Finn ate it right down. More, said the baby, and he gobbled up another loaf. He seems a strong lad, said Cuchulainn, getting a little worried. If this was the baby, the father must indeed be a bit stronger than Cuchulainn thought. Ah, yes, said Uma, beaming. Why, instead of dollies he plays with those white stones there in his cradle. Show the nice man, baby dear. Finn did as he was told. He picked up a stone that was really a ball of cheese, and he squeezed all the water out of it and popped it into his mouth and ate it down. Cuchulainn was not to be outdone by a baby, so he grabbed a stone and squeezed, and he squeezed, and he squeezed. He squeezed as he might, but he could not get one drop of water out of it. He popped it into his mouth, and with a chomp, there went the rest of all his teeth. A howl came out of him that almost broke all the windows. When he finally calmed down, Cuchulainn said to Una, What kind of teeth does this lad have? Must be made of iron. Let me see your chompers, baby. And at that, baby Finn opened his wide his mouth, and Cuchulainn stuck his brass finger, the very brass finger that was the secret of his strength, into the mouth. With a strong bite, Finn McCool bit down and bit the brass finger right off. Then Finn leapt out of the crib and began to pound the daylights out of poor Cuchulainn, and that was that. Out the door went Cuchulainn, never to bother anyone ever again, let alone Finn McCool. Tea's ready, my love, said Una, and Finn McCool sat down with his best giant wife in the whole wide world, and they lived happily ever after on Knockmany Hill. The end. Osen and Tirnan. One morning the Fionn were hunting deer on the shores of Loch Lane in Kerry. They saw a beautiful white horse coming towards them. Riding on the horse was the most beautiful woman that they had ever seen. She wore a long blue dress, and as blue as the summer sky, studded with silver stars, and her long golden hair hung to her waist. What is your name, and what land have you come from? Asked Finn, leader of the Fionn. I am Neve of the golden hair. My father is king of Tirnan, she replied. I have heard of a warrior called Osen. I have heard of his courage and of his poetry. I have come to find him and take him back with me to Tirnan. Osen was the son of Finn. He was a great hero and a poet. Tell me, Osen said, what sort of a land is Tirnan? Tirnan is the land of youth, replied Neve. It is a happy place with no pain or sorrow. Any wish you make comes true, and no one grows old there. If you come with me, you will find all this out is true." Osen mounted the white horse and said goodbye to his father and friends. He promised he would return soon, and the horse galloped off over the water, moving as swiftly as a shadow. The Fianna were sad to see their hero go, but Finn reminded them of Osen's promise to return. The king and queen of Tir na Nog welcomed Osen and held a great feast in his honor. It was indeed a wonderful land, just as Niamh had said. He hunted and feasted. At night he told stories of Finn and the Fianna and of their lives in Ireland. Osen had never felt as happy as he did with Niamh, and before long they were married. Time passed quickly, and although he was very happy, Osen began to think of returning home for a visit. Niamh didn't want him to go, but at last she said, "Take my white horse. It will carry you safely to Ireland and back. Whatever happens, though, you must not get off the horse and touch the soil of Ireland. If you do, you will never return to me or Tir na Nog." She did not tell him that, although he thought he'd only been away a few years. He had really been there 300 years. Ireland seemed a strange place to Osen when he arrived. There seemed to be no trace of his father or the rest of the Fianna. The people he saw seemed small and weak to him. And he passed through Glen na Smoil. He saw some men trying to move a large stone. Always eager to help, he jumped off. "I'll help you," he said. The men were terrified of this giant on a white horse. Stooping from his saddle, Osen lifted the stone with one hand and hurled it. With that, the saddle girth broke, and Osen was flung to the ground. Immediately, the white horse disappeared, and the men saw before them an old man. They took him to a holy man who lived nearby. "Where is my father and the Fianna?" Osen asked. When he was told that they were long dead, he was heartbroken. He spoke of the many deeds of Finn and the Fianna and their adventures together. He spoke of his time in Tir na Nog and his beautiful wife that he would never see again. Although he died soon after, the wonderful stories of Osen have lived on. The end. The Salmon of Knowledge. Long ago in Ireland, the king had a special army of soldiers called the Fianna to guard him. Cúval was their most famous leader. His enemies were jealous of him, so they killed him. Cúval's wife was afraid that her young son Finn might also be killed, so she took him to two women warriors who lived on the slopes of the Sliabh Boom Mountains. She asked the women to teach the young boy all that a son of Cúval should know, for she knew that one day her son would become one of the Fianna. At that time, any youth wishing to join the Fianna had to pass a very difficult test. He had to defend himself against spears of 9 men, using only a shield. He had to jump over a pole as high as his head, and he had to recite 12 books of poetry. When the women had taught Finn all the fighting skills he would need, they sent him to Finnegas, the poet, to learn the 12 books of poetry. Finnegas lived on the banks of the River Boyne. He had spent many years living beside this river and fishing in it. There was a fish in the Boyne known as the Salmon of Knowledge. The person who caught and ate it would know everything there was to know in the world. Finnegas liked the young, fair-haired Finn and agreed to become his teacher. One day, as Finn was learning poetry, he heard a shout and rushed to the river, and there stood Finnegas holding a large salmon. "Take the fish and cook it for me, Finn," he said. "Remember, though, you must not eat any of it." Finn did as he was told. He cleaned the salmon, lit the fire, and put the salmon over the fire to cook. All was well until a blister rose on the side of the salmon, and without thinking, Finn reached out and broke the skin of the blister. In doing so, he burned his thumb and sucked it to stop the pain. He finished cooking the fish as Finnegas had returned. The old man looked at Finn and saw in his eyes the knowledge he had spent so many years searching for. "There's nothing for me to teach you now," he said sadly. "You must go to Tara and take your father's place at the head of the Fianna. Always use your knowledge wisely," he said. Fionn set off at once to join the Fianna, and from then on, whenever he had a problem, all he had to do was bite down on his thumb, and he had the answer at once. The end. Setanta. 7-year-old Setanta was determined to become a member of the famous Red Branch Knights of Ulster. His father, the King of Dundalk, had told him about the special school in Armagh, called the Macra, for the young boys who would one day join the brave warriors. Setanta pleaded with his parents to let him go there, but they refused. "You are much too young, Setanta. Wait a little longer, and then we will allow you to go," they said. Setanta decided he could not wait any longer, and so one day he set off for Armagh. It was a long journey, but Setanta had his hurley and sliator to play with. It's the stick and the ball that they play hurling with. He hit the sliator far ahead and ran forward to catch it on his hurley stick before it would even hit the ground. When Setanta reached the castle of King Connor at Armagh, he found the 150 boys of the Macra gathered on a great plain of the front of the castle. Some of them were playing hurling, and this was his favorite game. He hurried over to join in. Almost immediately he scored a brilliant goal. The other boys were furious that the young boy had joined their game uninvited, and they attacked him. Setanta bravely fought him off. The noise disturbed the king, who was playing chess, and he sent a servant outside to see what was happening. Setanta was brought before the king. "I am Setanta, son of King of Dundalk, your brother. I have come all this way to join the Macra because I want to become one of the Red Branch Knights as soon as I am old enough," said Setanta. The king liked Setanta's brave words and welcomed him into the Macra. Time passed quickly for Setanta. He loved his new life at the Macra. One day, Cuillin, the blacksmith, who made spears and swords for Connor, invited the king, his knights, and Setanta to a feast. When it was time to set off for the feast, Setanta was playing a game of hurling. He told the king that he would follow as soon as the game was finished. The feast began, and Connor forgot to mention that Setanta would be joining the party later. Thinking all guests had arrived, the blacksmith unchained his wolfhound, which guarded his house every night. As soon as the game was over, Setanta set out. When he arrived at Cuillin's house, he heard the deep growls of the wolfhound. Suddenly the hound leaped forward out of the dark to attack. Setanta saw the sharp teeth bared. With all his strength, Setanta hurled his sliator down the hound's throat. Then he caught the animal by its hind legs and dashed it against a rock. With a loud groan, the wolfhound fell down dead. Inside, the feast party had grown and had heard the dog growling. "My nephew Setanta," cried Connor. "I forgot about him." He and the Red Branch Knights rushed out expecting to find a young boy torn to bits. But Connor was amazed and delighted to find his nephew alive and was proud of his great strength. Cuillin was relieved that the boy was safe, but he was sad that he had lost the wolfhound he loved, which had faithfully guarded his house every night. "Let me take the place of your hound until I have trained one of its puppies," said Setanta. Cuillin agreed. From that day on, Setanta was called Cuillin, which means the Hound of Cuillin. And that's the end. Mary Culhane and the Dead Man. Mary Culhane lived in Faraway, Ireland, which is nicknamed Too Far Away Ireland, since it was so remote. She was the eldest of 6 children, and they were poor, dirt poor you might say, for her father earned a meager living by digging graves at the graveyard near the far edge of their small, rural town. One day her father came home. Bone tired he was. and he plopped himself down in his comfortable easy chair. As the tension of the day left him, he let out a sigh of relief. Ah. Mary then heard him exclaim from his resting place, I can't believe it. I left my prized blackthorn walking stick back at the tree. The only thing me dear father gave me, and it will probably be gone by morning, he declared, in disgust at his own mistake. Mary Culhane ran from the kitchen, grabbed her shawl, and bolted to the door. I'll get it for you, father. She ran out the door before anyone could stop her, for no one, absolutely no one, went into the cemetery after dark. And indeed it was dark before she got there. A big moon, though, was just on the horizon as she entered the cemetery gate. She had been here many times before, and graveyards didn't scare her, but that was in the daylight. She carefully walked around the graves, for she'd been taught from the time she was a wee lass not to walk over them. That would be bad luck or a bad omen. She picked her way around the graves until she saw the walking stick lying against an old oak tree. Why, her father must have stopped here to have lunch and just forgot it. In a rush to retrieve the stick, Mary forgot to watch where she was stepping, and she fell into an open grave. As quickly as she could, she got up on her hands and knees, but as she did, she felt someone, or something, crawl onto her back. Before she could even try to get wherever it was off of her, an evil voice whispered in her ear, I, Mary Culhane, I've been waiting for you. Now you must take me into town to get me something to eat, for I hunger and thirst. Mary knew she knew this was an evil creature. She could tell by its scaly fingers and its fetid breath. Mary realized suddenly that she had no will of her own. She was helpless, fated to do only as the evil creature bade her to do. She reached up to the top of the grave and pulled with all her strength. She felt as if she were bearing the weight of the world on her shoulders, but somehow she managed to lift herself and the creature up onto the soft grass above. She lay there prone, looking into the sky, the dark, dark sky, while the creature screamed, Get up, Mary. Mary Culhane, get up and take me into town. Mary rose slowly, and with that creature riding her back, she trudged towards the village. They came to the main road where the first house appeared. Now, Mary Culhane, take me into this house so I may feed. Mary tried to resist, but was unable. So when she reached the first step, the second step, and was ready to take for the third step, the creature cried out, Not here, Mary Culhane, for I smell the stench of holy water. Mary stepped down and went to the second house. Now, Mary Culhane, bring me inside this house. But again, she reached the third step, and the creature cried out in pure agony. No, Mary Culhane, take me away, for I smell the stench of holy water. Mary again retreated and walked down the road until they came to the third house. She took the first step, the second, and the third, and the creature didn't say a word. Take me into the kitchen, Mary, and find me something to eat. Mary walked down the darkened hallway to the kitchen. There she let the creature slide off her back and onto her chair. Quickly, Mary Culhane, I don't have much time. Mary looked around. Finally she said, I'm sorry, all I can find is some oatmeal and some dirty water. Ah, Mary Culhane, I would teach these people not to leave me anything. Let me on your back. Again Mary did as the creature commanded her. Now take me upstairs. No, no, Mary screamed inside her head. For she knew this family, and she knew that the three boys, her classmates, slept upstairs. But she was powerless under the weight of this evil one's spell. She slowly made her way to the top of the stairs. There in the moonlight she could barely make out the figures of the three boys, fast asleep on their beds. The creature slid off her back and went over to each boy. He took out a sharp knife and slit each boy's finger. With the first drop of blood, their breathing stopped. With the second drop of blood, their hearts stopped. With the third drop of blood, all life left their bodies. He took the vial of blood and climbed back on Mary's back. Take me back downstairs to the kitchen, Mary Culhane, so I may feast. Mary, sad, had no choice but to walk down the stairs and into the kitchen. The creature slid off Mary's back and onto the chair. He took the oatmeal and poured it into 2 bowls. Then he took the vial of blood and began to pour it over the oatmeal. When he finished, he gave 1 bowl to Mary and said, "Now eat this." "No, no," she cried. She could not eat this bloody gruel, not stained with the blood of her friends. "Do it, and do it now." She picked up a spoon and brought a spoonful to her lips. The creature, satisfied with her actions, picked up his own bowl and began to greedily gobble up his portion. Mary saw her chance, though. She quickly, spoonful by bloody spoonful, put the tainted oatmeal into the folds of her neckerchief around her neck. She had just finished emptying her bowl when the creature put down his and wiped his bloody mouth with his tattered sleeve. "Ah, Mary Culhane, I see you are done. Now clean up this place so no one will know we have been here." Mary reached for the 2 bowls and began to wash them out. She waited until the creature turned away and put the neckerchief and the 2 bowls into the cabinet. "Hurry, Mary Culhane. I must get back to my grave before morning." She slowly walked over, and again he positioned himself on her back. She turned to go back down the hallway. "No, Mary Culhane, we cannot leave by that way." "Oh," she thought. She knows now. She's heard the tales that evil creatures, they must return by a different path. And it's true. So Mary turned around and went to the back door. She was ready to walk down the steps when the creature laughed, his insane laughter. "Ah, Mary Culhane, tell me what you see." Mary looked out on the horizon. "I see 3 hills. They are called the Haunted Hills." Now Mary Culhane began to fear for her own life because she didn't know what this crazy little evil creature was up to. "Do you know why, Mary Culhane? I'll tell you why. Because buried in that middle mound is all the gold and silver and jewels the evil ones have gathered over the many years of evil doing. But only the dead know of it." Now she knew of the gold. He wouldn't possibly let her live knowing the secret. On and on into the night they went, the creature laughing and taunting, telling her stories, evil stories that no one wants to hear. The moon set in the western sky, throwing the sky into pitch black. Finally, they started to approach the cemetery by the back road. As they did, a rooster crowed. "Ah, Mary Culhane, what is that awful noise?" Mary knew full well it was a rooster, and that morning must be close at hand. But she said instead, "'Tis nothing but the bleating of a sheep." "Hurry, Mary Culhane, hurry!" Mary reached the graveyard and was trying to find her way around the graves when the inky black sky started to turn a soft gray, and again they heard the rooster crowing. "Ah, Mary Culhane, what is that foul noise?" "It is nothing, I say, but the barking of a dog." "Quickly, Mary Culhane, for I feel myself weakening." Mary saw the oak tree. She saw the open grave. She walked slowly towards it. Just then the sky broke open, and the first beam of morning dew drew across the sky and into the graveyard. Beams of light scattered the limbs of the tree, and the rooster crowed for a 3rd time. Mary felt the creature jump frightening from her shoulders and slither into the pit. As it did, it cried, "Ah, Mary Culhane, you tricked me. I don't have the time to kill you now. If I would have known that, I would have never told you about the gold." Suddenly a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and at once she had her will to do as she would. She glanced down in the grave, but all she saw there were the whitened bones of the evil creature as the sun danced upon his grave. She grabbed her father's walking stick and went to the back of the grave and used it to tilt the creature's headstone, causing it to crash down upon him within his grave. Then Mary used it as she hurried home. Once there, she threw herself into her bed and fell into a deep sleep. A couple hours passed, and her mother ran into her room. "Mary, Mary, wake up. Something terrible has happened in town. Mary, please wake up." Mary stirred, and her mother could see that her hair was matted and tangled, and darkened circles smudged her eyes. Her dress was dirty, and it looked like blood stained her apron. Her mother backed out of this room scared, though. "Mary, just get some sleep, or meet us at your friend's home, the one with the 3 boys. Mary again fell into a deep sleep, but this time it was full of dreams. Dreams of an evil creature, the boys, the knife, the blood, oh, the blood. And then she suddenly awoke. She realized it wasn't a dream. It had actually happened. But she remembered something else. As they were walking back to the graveyard, she had asked the evil creature if there wasn't some way those boys could have lived. The creature laughed. "Ah, Mary Culhane, there was a way. There's always a way, you see, if they were to drink of their own blood. If they could live. But they would live. But, as you see, you ate their portion. Now there's no way at all." And he laughed and laughed at her. But she bolts right out of bed. "But there is a way. She hadn't eaten her portion. Maybe, just maybe, She got herself bathed and put on a fresh dress and headed toward town. When she got to the boys' home, she could see that the entire village was there trying to console the desolate parents. She went up to the father and said, "Please, please let me inside." "No, Mary, I can't do that. What is upstairs in that bedroom is not fit for a young lass to see." "But you don't understand. I think I know a way to save their lives. I beg you," Mary said. "Oh, Mary, if you could save my 3 sons' lives, I would give you anything in my power to give." "Just let me go in alone," she demanded. The father cleared the house, and Mary entered. She walked down the darkened hallway to the kitchen. She opened the cabinet, and there was her handkerchief, right where she had left it. She grabbed a spoon and went up to those stairs. She saw the lifeless forms of the 3 boys. She gently went over and put the spoon to each of their lips, and with the first drop of blood, the boys began to breathe. And with the second drop of their blood, their hearts began to beat. And with the third drop of blood, all life came back to their bodies. And what rejoicing there was when Mary walked outside, and behind her the 3 boys were alive and well. For 3 days and 3 nights there was a celebration like none before. And on the 3rd night the father came to Mary. "Mary, you have made me the happiest man ever to live. You give me back my boys, and Mary, I want to give you something, anything, just name it. Please, Mary, tell me." "Well," Mary said, "would you deed me the land behind your house, the one with the 3 hills on it?" "I'll give you that and much more," he said, as the oldest of the 3 boys, who was Mary's age, walked up and took her hand. So right there they wrote up a contract. After a long courtship, and when Mary had become of age, she married that boy. And don't you know that they built the foundation of their house between those 2 hills? And when they dug down, they found gold and jewels and silver. There was enough that Mary Culhane was the richest woman, and her father never had to pick up a shovel again. She had another stone slab, though, placed over that creature's grave, and a headstone placed with a particular warning. "In this graveyard never go, unless soon the rooster will crow." And even though the events of that night slowly faded away like a bad dream, there was something Mary Culhane never forgot, and that was to keep holy water at the front door. The end. The Children of Lear. Once upon a time there lived a king called Lear, who had 4 children, a daughter named Fionn, and 3 sons called Ficra, and Con. Their mother, the queen, was dead, and the children were sad because they missed her terribly. They missed the stories she used to tell them, the games she used to play, and the songs she sang at bedtime as she hugged them to sleep. The king saw that his children were sad and needed a mother, so he decided to marry again. His new bride was called Effie. She was beautiful, but she was not the kind-hearted person the king thought she was. Effie grew jealous of the 4 children because their father loved them so much. She wanted the king all to herself, so she planned to get rid of the children. She asked a druid to help her, and together they thought up a terrible spell. In the castle grounds there was a lovely lake, which the children spent most of their time playing beside. One day Effie went with the children to the lakeside, and as they played in the water, she suddenly pulled out a magic wand and waved it over them. There was a flash of light, and the children vanished. In their place were 4 beautiful white swans. One of the swans opened its beak and spoke with Fionn's voice. "Oh, what have you done to us?" she asked in a frightening voice. "I have put a spell on you," replied Effie. "Now everything you have will be mine. You will be swans for 900 years. You will spend 300 years on this lake, 300 years on the Sea of Moyle, and 300 years on the Isle of Glora. Only the sound of a church bell can break the spell." When the children did not come home that evening, the king went to look for them by the lake. As he came near, 4 swans swam up to him. He was amazed when they began to call out. "Father, Father," they cried, "where are your children? Effie, we are your children. Effie has placed a terrible magic spell on us." The king ran back to the castle and pleaded with Effie to change the swans back into his children, but she refused. Now he saw how selfish she was, and banished her from the kingdom. Lear promised a reward to anyone who could break the spell, but no one knew how. King Lear spent the rest of his life beside the lake talking to his children until he grew old and died. The swans were heartbroken. They no longer talked or sang, and nobody came to see them. 300 years passed, and it was time for the swans to move to the cold and stormy Sea of Moyle, between Scotland and Ireland. The poor swans were tossed about by the wild waves, and dashed against sharp rocks. It was a harsh life, with little food, and the years passed slowly. When the time came for them to fly to the Isle of Glora, the swans were old and tired. Although it was warmer on the island, and there was lots of food, they were still very lonely. Then one day they heard the sound that they had waited 900 years for. It was the sound of a church bell. The bell was ringing in the tower of a little church, and an old man called Kavik stood outside. He was amazed to hear swans talking, and listened to their sad story in astonishment. Then he went inside his church and brought out some holy water, which he sprinkled on the swans while he prayed. As soon as the water touched them, the swans miraculously began to change into an old woman and 3 old men. Lear's children were frightened. Kovak told them about God and his love for all people. They no longer felt scared. Fionn put her arms around her brothers, and all 4 old people fell to the ground dead. Kavik buried them in one grave. That night he dreamed he saw 4 swans flying up through the clouds, and he knew that the children of Lear were at last on their way to heaven to be with their mother and father again. The end. Neve's Kelpie. A Kelpie in Celtic mythology of Scotland was originally a name given to a water horse. This supernatural entity could be found in the lochs and rivers of Scotland, and also has a place in Irish, Welsh, and even Manx, and in the Orkney and Shetland Islands of folklore. The description of their appearances can vary in different tales, but sometimes white with smooth, cold skin, or black and gray. The Kelpie, in some stories, they are described as shapeshifters. They are able to transform themselves into beautiful women who can lure men and trap them. However, the Kelpie does not always take a female form and are actually usually male. They are also described as posing a particular danger to children when in the shape of a horse. Attracting their victims to ride them, they are taken underwater and then eaten. In Orkney, they are known as the Nuggle, and in the Shetland Islands, the water horse is known as Schupenleden. In Wales, the Cefaldir. In Manx mythology, there is a water horse known in Manx Gaelic as Cabal Ushti, and also associated with another creature of streams and rivers called the Glashtan. So the Kelpie or water horse legend is universal within the Celtic world. The legend tells of unspeakable evil, though, a creature bent on fear and death, so no other reason than its own evil existence. However, once the story was different. On a dreary, misty day in the coastal town of Larne, on the Isle of Man, a young Scottish warrior is standing at the bow of his ship, as he was chartered to bring him to this land so far from his own. An equally tall Manx gentleman helps mooring the ship on the dock as it drifts close. He catches the tether as it is thrown to him without even looking, unable or unwilling to turn his gaze from the very dangerous-looking warrior. After the ship is tied down, and the warrior has placed foot upon the soil of man, Eric the Manx gentleman welcomes the warrior to his land. But the question lingers that both men can sense. My daughter is in the care of a healer named Lingerton. She was on a ship and had taken ill upon their voyage, and she was left in her care, since it was deemed she might not survive the remainder of the trip, the warrior explained. By the way, I am Alistair Dew MacDonald of Skye. Welcome, MacDonald. I'm Eric Lingerton. Your daughter Neve has been the joy of my life for the past few weeks. She was only sick for a couple of days and made a miraculous recovery. On death's door she was for sure, though, Eric answered him. As the two men turned to leave the dock, the young Neve came running down the hill, jumping over a stack of wood and bounding into her father's arms, kissing him on the cheek as hard as she could. "Hello, Father." "Well, hello," he said. "I can't wait to get home and see Mother," she exclaims as she picks up her small travel bag and tosses it into the ship. As she jumps from her father's arms and begins to board the ship, at the surprise of the few ship hands, who were expecting at least a day's rest before returning. "I thought we'd stay," he begins to say. "Hamiageria dol ansengaki," she says in Gaelic to her father, with a wink of her eye and a suggestive leer. MacDonald looks around and doesn't see any real threat to him and his party. However, though Neve is young, she is not foolish, and would not act this way without cause. He reaches out a hand to Eric and thanks him for his hospitality, amidst his passive insistence that MacDonald stay at least one night. But Neve's strange Gaelic warning, "I want to go home," "I'm wanting to go home," kind of rang true into her father's ears. "So no, we must be going, Lingerton," he said. "Her mother is eager to see her, and she is to be home. We men are just pawns at the ready for our beloved womenfolk, eh?" he says as he reaches down and untethers the ship from the dock and motions for his crew to make way. As the medium-sized galley drifts away from the dock, turns and catches the breeze in its sail that will take it from this land, MacDonald and his daughter Neve watch as the seemingly friendly people upon the dock get smaller and smaller in their view. Once the mainsail has caught a strong breeze, MacDonald turns an inquisitive eye towards his daughter. "Explain." "In private, Father, please," she begs. Now he is worried. What has happened to his daughter that is unknown to him? Could it be something that might cause him to turn and lay waste to the sleepy little town on that dreary little island? Together they walk to the aft of the ship, enter a small cabin, the captain's cabin. Once inside, Neve sits down and readies herself to tell her story. while their father pours himself a dram of whiskey before sitting down to listen. "All right, begin," he demands. "Well, I was dreadfully sick, Father, and it is true that I would not have made it home, so leaving me on the island was the best thing for me," she begins. "I'm waiting to hear why I was forced to leave so rudely. Leave so quickly, Neve," he demands. "I'm getting to it, Father. It's just so horrible. I hate to even think upon it. However, Father, I must, for your sake and the sake of your crew. You see, Father, the captain of the ship really had no other choice than to leave me here. It isn't his fault at all, but you see, on the second night I was here, Miss Lingerton took me for a stroll to a nearby spring where she said the warm waters would heal me. And as she was helping me sit on the smooth rocks along the spring's edge, a giant water horse, a kelpie, rose up menacingly before us. Its eyes glowed in the moonlight. Miss Lingerton wasn't afraid. She paid the kelpie a single gold coin, and it allowed me upon its back. I was fearful as well. Whatever happened, young'un?" he demands at the edge of his seat. "The kelpie took me into the spring and dunked me in the healing waters over and over again until I was completely healed. Then he returned me to Mrs. Lingerton and returned to its watery prison. You see, the Lingertons had tricked the kelpie into the spring and was using it to make themselves known as healers. Now, I wondered why the kelpie would help them the way it does, so I crept out the next night and visited the beast once again." "By yourself? Whatever for?" Neve's father asked. "You see, Father, the kelpie appeared to me and told me that the Lingertons had captured its baby and was making it do these things so no harm would come to the baby. But harm did, as people aren't good caretakers of mystical creatures, and it quickly died. But the kelpie didn't know this, so we hatched a plan, and last night I went to the kelpie and we found where they had kept his baby. They hadn't even cared for its body, hence its death, Father. The kelpie wanted to kill all in the village that very instant, but knew that I must make it to safety before she exacted any sort of revenge, for I was its savior and wished it no harm." Just then the door to the cabin burst open and a crew member came rushing in. "Sir, you have to see this," he says before retreating from the cabin. MacDonald, with Neve in tow, make their way to the deck where they can see the smoke billowing from the town of Larne they had just left. "Should we return, sir, to offer assistance?" the crewman asked. "No. Stay your course," MacDonald ordered, to many puzzled, worried eyes of his crewmen. Firmly, he grasped his daughter's arm and hurried her back to the cabin. As soon as the door closed behind them, he turned her and demanded the remainder of the story with a single word: "Now." "I've been entrusted with a sacred task, Father," she says as she picks up her bag and opens it in front of him. "It is a kelpie egg, Father." He looks into the bag, and sitting gently in a pile of gold coins is a black egg with gray streaks crisscrossing it. As he watches it wiggle from time to time, "Oh, Neve, what have you done?" he asks. "I've made a vow to lay this egg at the edge of the loch back home, and to tell it of its parents when it comes of age. You see, this first contact will be what determines if this kelpie will be good or bad." "What's with the gold?" he asks. "A gift," Neve says, "to ensure the deed gets done, for the kelpie believes it will perish seeking the vengeance it is owed," she explains. "And if it doesn't," he replies, "our loch will have 2 kelpies then, but they will be good. You know you cannot tell anyone, you know." "Of course, Father." And that's the end of the story. The Monster of Castle Glamis. He was an heir to one of Scotland's noble titles, but is said to have been locked away in a secret chamber in the family castle. His existence denied after being born seriously deformed. Thomas Lyon Bowes quite cruelly became known as the Monster of Glamis Castle, with the tragic birth of this heir feeding the imagination of Victorian storytellers, local gossips, and likely even giddy aristocrats, keen to entertain their guests after dinner. What is known is that Thomas was born on October 21st, 1821 at Glamis Castle in Angus, with the official record stating that the baby boy died on the same day. However, his parents were Thomas Lord Glamis, son of the 11th Earl of Strathmore, and Charlotte Lyon Bowles, were seen days and weeks walking the grounds of their castle, carrying a young infant. The couple were the great-great-grandparents of the Queen Mother, who was also born at Glamis, as was her daughter, Princess Margaret. Rumors started circulating in the villages around Glamis Castle immediately about the supposed death of young Thomas, which were likely fueled by reports from the midwife that Thomas had survived the birth. An apparent lack of gravestone for the boy probably supported the suspicions surrounding his fate. Over time, the story grew, though. Allegedly, a workman who had encountered Thomas in a passageway close to the chapel was offered money by the Earl to emigrate to Australia and never tell a soul of what he had seen. That workman's passed down what he knows to his son, and then it was passed to his grandson. And this is how we come to know of the monster of Glamis Castle today, dispelling all myth and rumor and telling the cold, hard facts of incest, murder, conspiracy, and revenge. Added proof of the tale is how the estate manager refused to step foot in the castle after being told about the purpose of the secret chamber. Sir Walter Scott, the famous writer, wrote of an eerie night at the Glamis Castle in which he referred to the secret chamber. Although he mentioned no monster, he did this in 1830, and a later version of his story featured the monster, appeared in the New York Times in 1864. So people knew. In 1908 edition of Notes and Queries published by Oxford University Press goes into great detail about the monster, or the mystery, of Glamis, with the writer claiming he had known the story for 60 years. The writer claimed to have spoken to the workman in Australia and had certain facts so close to the truth that it was no surprise when he disappeared. It's said the story was and is that in the Castle of Glamis, the celebrated old castle of the Earls of Strathmore, is this secret chamber, and in this secret chamber is confined a monster, who is the rightful heir to the title and property, but who is so unpresentable that it is necessary to keep him out of sight and out of possession. The secret is supposed to be known to three persons only: the Earl of Strathmore, his heir, and the manager of the estate. Depictions of the mysterious Earl also emerged in time. Cynth Hope Simpson, in her book Who Knows, suggested the boy may have suffered a genetic defect, given the child's parents were actually first cousins. Historian Mike Dash, who writes for the Charles Fort Institute, also wrote of a second secret of the Glamis legend that emerged during the 19th century. Far from being home to an unwanted heir, the secret chamber contained the remains of members of the rival Ogilvy clan, who came from the lands at nearby Kirnmore. Unable to admit that they have been the cause of his son's deformity and mutation, Lord Thomas Glamis filled his son's head with tales of a rival clan, Ogilvy, and the magical vengeance that the spells and witches of that clan had probably cursed upon him for the wrongdoing by their forefathers, who had clashed from time to time. Then one day, after members of the rival Ogilvy clan sought refuge at Glamis during a storm, they were allowed in the property, given hospitality, and shown into the chamber, where they were barricaded in and starved. Thomas Lyon Bowes, the monster of Glamis, was finally able to get his revenge he had dreamed of after years of psychological torture by his father. He ripped them from limb to limb and into shreds, and stacked their bodies to rot. He would not let anyone remove the bodies either. He considered their bones his conquest. Historian Mike Dash wrote that their skeletons, still scattered on the floor, was the secret that the Lion families were so anxious to conceal. While the true mystery of Castle Glamis remains unexplained, it does appear true that the castle was burdened with a particularly dark secret, one that grew and got increasingly uncomfortable and uncontrollable. Thomas Lion Bowles, the monster of Glamis, became bored with his secret chamber after so many years, and when he became strong enough, he vanished. He was given a meal one evening, and the next morning when servants went to collect the dinner tray, the secret chamber door was unlocked, and the adjacent window was open. Footprints could be easily seen in the mud and the dew-drenched lawn. The prints went all the way to the nearby stream, and were lost forever from there. Thomas Lion Bowles, the monster of Glamis, was gone. Now, Claude Bowles Lion, the grandfather of the Queen Mother, who inherited the earldom in 1865, reportedly said, "If you could even guess the nature of this castle's secret, you would get down on your knees and thank God it was not yours." Reports say that for years the family made payoffs and bribes to keep many incidents quiet, of people coming up missing, of cattle becoming missing, found mutilated, and then one day it all just stopped. It is believed that Thomas Lion Bowles, the monster of Glamis, had just died, but nobody knows really for sure, because no body was ever found. The end. Fionn and the Dragon. Fionn said goodbye to Finnegas and set off on the road to Tara. It was a busy one, with people arriving for the great feast of Samhain. Fionn arrived in time for the feast, but there was no seat for him at the banquet hall. "Who are you?" the High King asked. "I don't recognize you. Tell me your name." "I am Fionn, the son of Cúval," said the young man. There was silence in the great hall. All eyes were on Gulmach Morna, the man who had killed Finn's father, Cúval. The king spoke. "You are the son of a friend, and you are welcome at my feast." He put Fionn next to him, and next to his own son, and the feast began. During the feast, the High King spoke. "For the past 9 years, Tara has been visited on the festival of Samhain by an evil spirit. The spirit appears in the form of a fire-breathing dragon, which causes great damage. My magicians are powerless. Many warriors have tried to kill it, but have all failed. Is there anyone among you who will save Tara?" the High King asked. No one spoke, but Fionn stood up. "What reward will be given to the person who is successful?" he asked. "I will grant you whatever you want," replied the king. "In that case, I will defend Tara from the evil spirit," said Fionn. Many laughed. But Fionn walked to the outer walls of the city. The sky was dark, and there was no sound to be heard. The people were gathered safely inside the walls, and Fionn heard footsteps. "Who goes there?" he called. "I am a friend. Come," came the reply. "I was a friend of your father's, and I have come to repay a favor your father did for me. As you know, when the dragon approaches, he plays sweet music. Anyone who hears this music falls asleep at once. Take this magic spear, and as soon as the music begins, press it against your forehead, and the music will have no power over you. Now I must hurry away, Fionn." And Fionn was left alone. The darkness came low, and from the darkness came a low, sweet sound. It was the magic music of the fairy world. Immediately Fionn put the spear to his forehead, and although the people of Tara fell into a deep sleep, Fionn remained wide awake. The dragon breathed a long blue flame. Fionn aimed and fired the spear, and the dragon fell dead on the spot. Fionn cut off the dragon's head and presented it to the king. "What is your wish?" the king said. "I ask to be the leader of the Fianna, as my father was," replied the proud hero. The High King agreed. "You have a choice to make," the High King said to Gul Mac Morna. "You can accept Fionn as your leader, or you must leave Ireland." Gul thought for a while and then spoke to Fionn. "Here is my hand. I will gladly serve you." Once Gul Mac Morna had submitted, the other warriors of the Fianna followed. So Fionn became their leader, and with his father, just as his father had done before him. And that's the end. Diarmait and Grania. Traveling through Ireland, you will see beautiful stone configurations called dolmens. A dolmen is two massive long tables of limestone laid down parallel to each other, and a massive capstone laid overhead to complete a makeshift shelter. This made what is called an lepi Diarmait agus Grania, that is, the bed of Diarmait and Grania. Now, legend tells us that Grania was to marry Fionn, chief of the Fianna, the old Celtic band of warriors. But alas, her heart had been chosen by another, Diarmait. She fell in love with him and even threatened him with her magic, if he was not to elope with her. Now, he respected the might of the Fianna, and especially that of Fionn. However, her magic was powerful, which meant almost limitless possibilities. So the two of them eloped, having a druid marry them in secret. When Fionn found out, he had the Fianna chase them all over Ireland, searching from glen to glen and castle to castle. He intended to kill Diarmait and bring back Grania, while Fionn stayed behind just in case his betrothed had a change of heart and returned to him. Along their journey, they received help from the friendly people and friendly animals, and got advice from the wisest of the elders living in Ireland's countryside. They learned not to spend more than 2 nights in any one place. They were to travel by night and sleep during the day. And this is why Diarmait began building the dolmens, so that the sun would not keep them awake and they would be protected from harm. Because in those days, wild beasts still roamed the plains and the mountains of Ireland. Modern-day archaeologists say that these dolmens were burial places, and in fact some were. But Diarmait and Grania, they would bury the recently dead in the towns along their travels inside of the dolmens in order to throw off the Fianna. That would keep them busy digging and making Fionn worry about the graves that they may be of his dear Grania. It is a lovely image of the acts that sometimes accompanies true love. Love affects our common sense, rationality, inhibitions, and our respect and even our integrity. Like an adolescent, there is a new fire consuming your life. In a way, you are revitalized, a phoenix from the ashes of your former self. Without love, your soul is asleep. There is no passion. You are absent from living a full life. With love, you are consumed by passion. It is awakened within you. Your soul becomes young and free and dances again. Dolmens are scattered all across Ireland, and this tells you that Diarmait and Grania were on the run from Fionn for a very long time. But whatever came of the two lovers, nobody knows. Well, I don't think. There's different legends tell of different stories. Fionn had to learn to live without his beloved Grania, though, of course, which is probably what put such a distaste for romance in his heart. There are many legends about what had happened to them, but the one that seems to fit the immensity of their love for one another the most is that such a great love, a great romance, a great man and woman could not perish at the hands of the Fianna. It just could not be so. For they would certainly be searched for till the end of time, if so ordered by Fionn. Their legend ends, though, with a new beginning. You see, the the greatness of the love that drew the attention of the Niamh of the Golden-Headed, the daughter of the king of the land of youth, Tir na Nog. She told her father one day as they looked down that such a love must go on forever. There is no other place that this could happen, though, except Tir na Nog, which he agreed. So they sent guardians from the land of the youth along with Niamh, who rode straight up to the dolmen that the two lovers were sleeping in that day. Niamh called out to them and told them of her offer, and without a second thought, they were swept away upon the backs of heavenly horses and taken to the land where their love can flourish forever. The end. That's sweet. Deirdre of the Sorrows. When the baby Deirdre was born, her father, Fionn, asked the wise Druids to look to the stars and tell him what her future held. The wise Druids answered, "This baby will cause great trouble. She will grow up to be the most beautiful woman in Ulster, but she will cause the death of many of our men." When the Red Branch of Knights of Ulster heard this, they were very worried for their lives. They went to King Conor, demanding that baby Deirdre be killed. The king thought for a while. "I have an answer," he said. "Deirdre will be brought up far away from here, and when she is old enough, I will marry her." Deirdre was taken away at once to a deep wood. The king chose a wise old woman called Laracham to care for her and teach her. As Deirdre grew older, she became as beautiful as the Druids had foretold. She had long golden hair and deep blue eyes. However, she was a very lonely girl. One day, Deirdre taught Laracham about a dream she had had. Every night, a dream of a tall, dark warrior. His hair is as black as the raven, his skin as white as snow. He is fearless in battle. Laracham was worried, as she knew the man Deirdre dreamed about. "He is Nois, one of the sons of Usnech. You must never mention your dream again. You will be married to King Conor very soon," she said. Deirdre begged Laracham to send for Nois so she might meet the man of her dreams. At first Laracham refused, but she hated to see Deirdre unhappy, and she gave in. Deirdre and Nois met, and they fell in love at once. "We must go far away from Ulster now," said Deirdre. "I cannot marry Conor." Deirdre, Nois, and his brothers Aenil and Arden set off. They traveled all about Ireland, but no one would help them because they all feared the anger of King Conor. Finally, they sailed to a small island off the coast of Scotland. There they lived for some time until one day a messenger arrived from the king. He reported that King Conor had forgiven them. Deirdre did not trust the message, but the sons of Usnech believed it. Reluctantly, Deirdre set off with them to Ireland. On the way, she pleaded with them to turn back, but they would not listen. When they arrived, they were sent to the house of the Red Branch Knights, not the king's castle. Now Deirdre was sure that a trap had been set for them. Deirdre was right. Soon the house was surrounded. The sons of Usnech fought bravely, but they were outnumbered. They were seized and brought before Conor. "Who will kill these traitors for me?" asked the king. But none of the Red Branch Knights would kill a fellow knight. Suddenly an unknown warrior from another kingdom stepped forward. "I will kill them," he shouted. With one blow he cut off the heads of the Scots of Usnech. Deirdre screamed and fell dying to the ground beside the body of Nois. So great was her sorrow that her heart had broken. Deirdre's father was so angry with Conor that he left Ulster and went to live in Connacht. Many other warriors went with him and joined the army of Queen Maeve. This army was later to fight bloody battles against the Red Branch Knights. So Deirdre did bring sorrow and trouble to Ulster, just as the Druids had foretold. The end. Bunsworth's Banshee. The story of the Reverend Charles Bunsworth and the Banshee took place in Buttevant, County Cork, Ireland, in the 18th century. The Reverend was much a respected man in the area and admired as an accomplished harpist. When he became ill, though, local people got concerned. This was a concern that was heightened not by the immediate prognosis of his illness, which was not thought to be terminal, but the strange events that took place in the area prior to his demise. The servant of the household reported to the concerned family of Reverend Bunsworth that he had heard the wailing of a banshee. He described how the woman had wailed and moaned and clapped her hands in despair, repeating the Reverend's name over and over and over again. The local people knew that this could only mean one thing, for the banshee was known to all as the lone female figure who cries out in agonizing despair to herald in an impending death. The Irish people knew her to be Banshee, or Banshee, also known in other parts of the Celtic world. The Banshee is seen as a messenger from the other world, which is both the home of the gods and the realm of the dead. The Banshee can take many forms, and she can be old, she can be young, or beautiful, or ugly. She is often heard but not seen, and her lonesome cry instills fear in those that hear it. An eerie silence forewarns of her piercing cry. From the smallest insect to the fiercest beast, none make a sound to disturb the banshee when she cries. The family of Reverend Bunsworth dismissed the talk of the servant as mere superstition, though, for the Reverend was a man of God, not such superstition as that. Besides, his health appeared to be improving. However, this was only false hope, for his condition declined rapidly on the night before his death took a final turn. Reverend Bunsworth had been moved downstairs to sleep in peace. Outside of his room's window, though, moaning and clapping was heard. When the servants went outside to investigate, it was found that a rosebush close to the window had been partially dislodged, as in someone had stepped all over it. There was no sign of anybody, though, that could have made the noises or dislodged the bush. Those who had remained inside the house once again heard the sound of moaning and clapping coming from different areas all around the house, sending them in a flurry to discover where the noises emanated from. As the night wore on, the Reverend's health worsened. The noises had stopped, but it was evident that they had taken their toll on the poor Reverend. He had weakened, and by the time that dawn broke through the stained-glass window at the side of his bed, he had expired as well. Many said this was inevitable, that it had been predicted by the arrival of the Banshee. This is what is so troubling about the Banshee. Its ill curse comes on without notice, runs its course, and cannot be subsided by any bribe or offering. If you hear the anguished cry of the Banshee, pray that it isn't coming for you, because there's nothing you can do about it. The end.